Hello, hello, Dr. Kirk here with you again to talk about the research process. Today we'll be refining your topic. So hopefully up to this point, you've given a bit of thought already to your research topic. We talked about starting with an interest statement, however plain and rough draft or however that looks, doesn't have to be anything real fancy, to just lay out, okay, this is what I'm interested in, and then do some exploratory research, see what's already out there. Is there a lot? Is there a little? Do you need to expand your topic if there's not very much research out there, or if there's lots and lots, you need to narrow down the topic, right? We've talked about this for a number of weeks. And of course, as you're doing that research, you're keeping detailed notes with all the citations so that you can always go back to those sources and find any further information that you need. And if you are citing those sources, of course, or drawing from them at all in your writing, you need to be citing those correctly in your writing as well. So at this point, when you want to refine your topic, you need to go back and review those notes. Hopefully you have kept very detailed notes. And I've been working on my own research topic, as I've told you over the last few weeks, on Mike Post, who wrote all those great TV themes, and especially in the 80s and 90s, he was real popular, but still is writing today. And I've done quite a bit of research about him, and I can show you what my notes look like. Yeah, don't judge how messy they are, please. All right, real quick, let me find it here. All righty. So my research notes, let's see, are a lot of copy and paste from different articles, and this was from Oxford Music Online, I showed you already, and a bibliography, so I could go follow up on the sources that author used in his article, and then lots and lots of articles and interviews and things that I extra sound effects there. Anyway, that I went through. So as I went through this, I took detailed notes. And as you can see, I've just started to highlight some of the main points. Anything that stood out as this could be something very important, and or is this a direction that I really want to follow as I am narrowing down my topic and working specifically to define exactly what that thesis statement is going to be. So anything that stands out that way, I've just started to highlight, and then I can start brainstorming on exactly how I want to refine that topic. So reviewing your notes, that's the first thing. As you do that, you want to consider that whatever your thesis statement it ultimately will be, we're almost to that point of defining the thesis statement, but we'll really nail it down next week. But remember that you're drawing your conclusions based on the research that you have done and not the other way around. You probably have heard people, maybe you've done this yourself, where you've already decided what it is that you want to write. And then any of the sources that you find are really just to affirm what you've already concluded. And that's not really the way that it's supposed to go. What we want to do is survey all of the body of research that is out there on this particular topic, read it, analyze it, sort through it, and then determine our conclusions, not the other way around. So you've probably seen on the news or other places where people can take data and add it together to mean pretty much anything they want it to mean. That's because they can pick and choose which things they want to show you in terms of evidence for their conclusion. But what we really should be doing is taking all of it and then determining what that concludes. So keep that in mind. Next, consider what the sources are that you have found and what you didn't find. So the next topic point here, are there holes or gaps in the available sources on this topic? So those two kind of go together. If you have lots and lots about a particular composer, but maybe there's not much about their influences or something like that. Maybe there's not a lot in terms of analysis on a particular piece or a group of pieces or something that might be real interesting to you. Whatever it is, where those holes and gaps are where you can step in and assert your own thesis, your own statement. So on the blue point here on the bottom, remember, it is not sufficient to write a book report. And I know that sounds really funny, probably something like you had to do in elementary school. But a book report, remember, is you've read whatever book, presumably, and you're just reporting on or summarizing the main points of the book. In this case, it would be books or articles from journals and so forth. It's not enough to just summarize what they said or your whole research paper to just be a report on what other people said. You need to step in, draw your own conclusions, and assert your own thesis. Then use those sources that you read as evidence to support your thesis. So you are the scholar here, and it is your voice that we are hearing in the paper, not other people's voices. Okay, so keep that in mind. You're using those sources to support your own thesis, your conclusions that you have drawn from your reading. Okay, as you are working to define your topic, to refine your topic, to narrow it down, keep in mind that there are a few things that we're looking for. The first is it needs to be definable. So if you have something like Beethoven is the greatest composer of all time, well, maybe I love Beethoven, but that's not something that we actually can define. How do you define who is the greatest composer of all time? You know, is there a test for that? There's a measuring scale for that? No, there's not really. And so that's more in the opinion category and not something that we actually can provide evidence to support. So keep that in mind. If you think Beethoven is the greatest composer of all time, think of another way to reword that you might be able to use for that topic. Next, make sure that it is provable, whatever your statement. I think that goes right along with Beethoven being the greatest composer of all time, or fill in the blank, whoever composer. Whatever statements you make have to be provable. They cannot be opinion, they cannot be huge generalizations. They need to be something that is very specific and can be proven by your evidence in the research that you have done. Keep in mind opinions, although you hopefully have opinions about the topics that you are choosing. And we talked about an interest statement. So the fact that you find something interesting is your own opinion, great. But the thesis needs to have something that is much more tangible than just I like something or I don't like something, right? So let's keep that in mind. It does need to be something original. And this is not to the scale that you would find if you continued on into doctoral research, for example. Your doctoral dissertation would have to be something that no one else in the world has ever written. That's a pretty high bar, isn't it? That's not what I'm asking for here, but it does need to be something you have not ever written about. It needs to be something that is not all pervasive in the whole academic field, that everyone has written all about this. You need to find your niche and assert your thesis in that niche. So something that is original to you and not all pervasive in the field already. Something that is relevant, hopefully it's relevant to you, but also relevant to the world of music, to our society, to this particular discipline and field that you are studying or researching. Those things need to be relevant. All right, so I wanted to pull out an example here of one that I was researching just last fall. And I told you a bit about my research into Aaron Copland, who I find to be a pretty fascinating character, but also as an American composer who's especially known for being sort of the godfather of American music. Now, his career and George Gershwin's career intersected a few times, actually not as many as you might think, even though they were born just a couple miles away from each other within the same time period. But anyway, so as I was researching Aaron Copland, and I crossed over somewhat to Gershwin because I found all these interesting intersections. And I was really struck with how interesting it is that the radio, which was a very modern invention in the 1920s and early 30s, when Gershwin's career was really taking off, that the radio played quite a role in his career. So I was really interested in that. So let me pop over to a different document real quick, and let me show you my thesis statement. I really struggled actually with creating a very distinct and definable thesis statement because, sorry, there we go. Because I thought it was very interesting that radio played such a role in his career, but that in itself is not enough, right? That's interesting, but there needs to be more to it. So let me show you what I wrote in my proposal. This is the abstract that I sent to the Society of Music Theory in Ireland, which they accepted. So I was able to present this paper to them. And let me just show you here. So I started with a quote from the New York Times. As I said, Gershwin was a very popular figure in the early 20th century, not just in America, internationally known character. So he was written up quite a bit in the New York Times and other places. So it said, radio has done a lot for me, said George Gershwin, iconic 20th century American composer. It may kill a popular song faster than any other medium, but radio has also brought the finest music to people who never before had had the chance to hear it. For the early 20th century, the invention of the radio was a modern marvel, so mysterious and compelling that it plucked music and entertainment right out of the air, providing generations of people, regardless of means, the ability to listen to Gershwin songs in their home, earning the composer a household name. As such, in 1924, the 1924 premiere of Rhapsody in Blue was so well attended that it reportedly could have sold out 5 times over. So it's really interesting to think about, and I won't get a whole long lecture going on that, but that in the early 20th century, most average people, maybe would argue still today, couldn't afford a ticket to go to a major concert hall to hear, the latest music that was being composed and performed. But the radio, which didn't cost very much, most homes had a radio, and so they could hear all of this music that was being broadcast. So let me skip down just a little bit to this last paragraph. In tracing the role of radio in the career of George Gershwin, this paper will argue that not only did radio play a role, it was perhaps the most crucial aspect of his career. Were it not for his voice and music reaching millions of Americans in their homes at pivotal points in his career, the composer could not have achieved such success with his large-scale works, nor would he have achieved immortality as a charismatic, versatile composer who continues to be a household name nearly a century after his death. So this first sentence in the last paragraph, that's the thesis statement. So I struggled a bit when I was crafting this initially, that my interest statement was, I was interested that radio played such a role in his career because that really was very modern in the 1920s and early 30s. But that's not quite enough. Me being interested is not quite enough to set it into the field of scholarship that already has existed. And so to take that additional clause that it was perhaps the most crucial aspect of his career because it allowed him to come into people's homes, his voice and music, obviously, into people's homes that the television didn't exist yet. So this was the form of entertainment in most people's homes during that time. And much more so than today. I'd say most composers today that are living, working, writing, performing are not things that every average American has heard of. Most. I assume that that's true. Again, that's opinion. I have not defined that and I haven't proven that, but I would suspect that most average Americans don't know all of the current living composers right now. Whereas in 1930, almost everyone in America knew who George Gershwin was, which is pretty fascinating, right? So let me pop back over to my slides and I will show you real quick. Let me show you my presentation here just a little bit on George Gershwin. pretty interesting to present on him to a group of Irish musicologists. They had a lot of interesting things to say about that. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me pop over here. Yeah, here we go. All right. So there was a lot, as I said, a lot to say about him, quotes from the New York Times and so forth, performances that he gave on the radio. I just wanted to play just a little blip for you. Gershwin had his own radio show. He hosted the show where he played some of his own music and talked about what he thought was important in music. This was in 1934, and I thought you all would find this pretty fascinating. It aired twice a week for 15 minutes, okay? 2 15-minute slots, and they paid him $2,000 a week in 1934. That's the equivalent of about $40,000 now. So imagine that, being paid $40,000 to be on the radio for 30 minutes total a week. That's pretty amazing. So I wanted to play just a little blip because it is, I know I keep saying fascinating, but it really is. When I was talking last week about primary sources, that you want to get the information from the horse's mouth as much as possible. Well, in the 1930s, and unfortunately Gershwin died in his 30s, in the 1930s. That was pretty amazing to have that, to have any recordings. There are in fact a few rare video recordings of him as well, but to hear his own voice on the radio and hear him play his own music is pretty amazing. So let me play just a little bit. Hold on one second, sorry. Yes. Sorry, you all don't have to look at all the things I'm shifting around on my screen. So anyway, let me play just this little blip that I wanted to hear of Gershwin.
Good evening. This is George Gershwin speaking. The orchestra just played my song, Mine. Tonight I'm going to play you my latest composition, which I wrote a few months ago down in Palm Beach, Florida. This is a composition in the form of variations on a tune, and the tune is I Got Rhythm. I think you might be interested to hear about a few of the variations we're going to play. After an introduction by the orchestra, the piano plays the theme rather simply. Like that. The first variation is a very complicated rhythmic pattern played by the piano while the orchestra takes the theme. Against that, the orchestra fits in the tune. The next variation is in waltz time, and the third is a Chinese variation in which I imitate Chinese flutes played out of tune, as they always are, like this. Next, the piano plays the rhythmic variation in which the left hand plays the melody upside down, while the right plays it straight, on the theory that you shouldn't let one hand know what the other is doing, like this. Then...
Okay, so you get the idea. It is pretty interesting, though, isn't it, to hear a composer, their own words and their own description of their music. Is just really fascinating to me. Right, just a second, please. I'm gonna flip over to my other screen. Sorry, I'm slow today on my screen. All righty. Okay, last page. Next week, we'll talk more about crafting your specific research statement or your thesis statement. And there's quite a bit in your textbook on this, on the academic writing textbook, you know the one. Hopefully you've been keeping up with those readings. There's so much information there. I mean, so much detailed information, things we probably never ever did learn in school about grammar and all kinds of things like that. So make sure that you're following along with that. But all the way towards the end, this is page 330. What's it? Yes. Okay. So constructing a research paper all the way in the back, 327, 28, 29, 30, etc., which I have prescribed for just a little bit later in this semester, but you're welcome to skip to this section. It gives you a little bit of extra information on how to craft a thesis statement. And this page that I've given here on the screen, which I believe is 330, gives us some specific information, what I was referring to as something that needs to be relevant or original. And this is, they refer to this as creating your own research space. That is, where are you finding your niche in the field of research of the particular topic that you're working with? So that's something you want to consider. Another thing that you'll want to look at on our Blackboard page for this week on course materials, I included a couple of extra PDFs on academic writing, some do's and don'ts of academic writing. And all of this is also in your textbook. So as I said, you really want to make sure that you're keeping track of those things. But one of the greatest offenders that I've noticed, which is a very common problem, is in our writing to eliminate all of the extra words, the ones that are unnecessary or extraneous words, if you will. And you've probably, many of you noticed comments of mine in grading your assignments so far about that, because our spoken language is so much different than academic writing. And in our spoken language, we do tend to use filler words and extraneous words and more informal words. But in your academic writing, you want to be as clear and concise as possible. So the PDFs that I've posted on our Blackboard page for this week are itemizing some of those things that maybe it's more helpful to see, just sort of in a snapshot. So one of the things, as I mentioned, is those filler words. Another thing is writing in the first person. That's something that you may be used to doing, but in academic writing, generally, we're writing in the third person. So we're not using like, I think this, or my opinion is blah, blah, blah. So you're trying to set yourself back as more of an objective researcher, and rather than being in the action, so to speak. It's not I such and such, it's going to be this reviewer or this author feels this way. So you're going to set yourself back as more of watching it happen rather than being in it, if that makes sense. So again, if you have any questions on any of this, any of your research or crafting your or refining your topic, any of that, please reach out and let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all next week. Take care.